Okay, so I just got back from the movie theater after watching Iron Lung, and I have a lot of thoughts, and I wanted to record them as quickly as I possibly could before kind of my impression of the movie is gone. I do want to preface this by first just saying that I come into Iron Lung and I come into Markiplier not really knowing who Markiplier is or was, which I know is kind of surprising. I get it. Whatever. It's fine. I know he has millions of subscribers on YouTube, but I seriously had no idea who this guy was until about a month ago, until somebody brought him up randomly. And then I saw this trailer for Iron Lung and learned all about kind of what it was, sort of, a little bit. Apparently it's based off of a game. So yes, I'm also coming into this not knowing what this game is even about or what its lore entails or really anything. And I think that is kind of an important disclaimer because I think people who are huge fans of Markiplier have this opinion of the movie that is obviously a bit biased as opposed to people who maybe don't know who Markiplier is or maybe have negative opinions of Markiplier. But regardless of that, I'm coming into this kind of with zero expectations, not knowing who anybody is, not knowing what this movie is about, not knowing anything at all, okay? So just bear that in mind as I kind of give my first impressions. Overall, I want to sort of begin by saying I think that this movie overall is worth watching. I thought ultimately this was a good movie. And I'm saying that because I think that it was worth my time. I think it was worth the amount of time that I went out to go and watch it, to pay for it, to stand in line, to drive to the movie theaters, and to sit in a theater for 2 hours and watch it. I don't feel like my time was wasted. I think that if you really enjoy these sorts of Lovecraftian, esoteric type stories that are kind of difficult to piece together, I think you'll like this movie, especially if you're a fan of Markiplier. Now, what I will say, I'll start with kind of the good things, and then I'll start with sort of the criticisms I have of the movie, and I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible because I would love for you to go out and support Markiplier, are a Markiplier fan, because I think that ultimately this movie deserves a very good chance. I think it deserves a good first impression because what it reflects, in my opinion, is an independent person or filmmaker, I guess in this circumstance, content creator, right, who was super passionate about something and was ultimately able to create an extraordinarily well-produced final product given the sort of gold standard comparison of what Hollywood tends to produce. And with that being said, I'll talk about first the good things of the movie. So the good things. Markiplier himself, this being his first time acting in like this feature film of his, did an outstanding job of holding down the entire 2-hour duration of this film as he was basically the only person that had screen time. And I think that as a first-time actor, okay, I think he did a fantastic job. Now, is he perfect? Absolutely not. I think that there were some problems. I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at some of the things he did. But again, we'll talk about that a bit later on. Overall, though, I think for, not having any acting experience, or maybe he does that I'm just not aware of, and coming into this film and for being able to maintain my curiosity and entertain me for 2 hours straight is an incredible achievement. I think that that's really one of the most outstanding takeaways that I could have coming out of this film. The next really amazing thing is just how well produced it is. Like, I thought the camera work was especially incredible. The cinematography was really, really well done. The cutaways of some of the scenes in the movies were so cinematic. I thought that the lighting was really good at building tension, like all of these things kind of fitting together to make that cinematic experience was so well done. And given, the $9 million budget that this movie ultimately had, and given it was just such a small team of really passionate people, I thought that this blew me away in terms of its production value. And so I really do want to lend a lot of, praise to those who dedicated so much time and energy into making this film so well produced and well crafted. I really enjoyed that. Another good thing was the sound design. I felt like the sound design was really well done. I thought that the music and kind of the sound effects were really good. Now, I think I do have a little bit of a criticism when it comes to the dialogue and some of the sound mixing, but again, we can talk about that a little bit later when I get into some of the criticisms. But overall, I thought that the sound design, again, super, super well done. Very, very happy with that. Additionally, the story, so the narrative itself. I think that this is a difficult plot to pull off. It's any sort of film that is like trying to be Lovecraftian, trying to be esoteric in its storytelling, trying to be or trying to piece together little bits of hints here and there and then tie it all together in a big bow. I think that's a very difficult story to tell. And given my lack of knowledge of not knowing what the fuck this game is about, right? I don't know what it's about. I think that overall, I was able to put together the story. I'm not totally certain, I guess. I have a lot of questions that need to be answered. But I think that for a first-time filmmaker, for somebody that's trying to just, create something that they're super passionate about, I'm like blown away. I'm blown away about how well it was all put together in the end. So I thought that that was a really good thing. Now, again, here's something I think that is kind of a good thing to insert here is that I don't have an impression of what this game is like. And so from what I understand is that this is a pretty accurate one-to-one recreation of the game's experience, which I think a lot of fans of the game will enjoy. So if you're a fan of the game, great. Right. This is probably a fantastic dedication to that experience, which is awesome for you. I think that a lot of the technology and the kind of the way in which the Iron Lung or the ship itself navigated the world was really, really cool. I thought the premise was really, really cool. Again, I can't necessarily give credit to Markiplier for coming up with the story or the premise because it's technically based off of an independent game creator's idea. So I'm not going to really lend credit to Markiplier for coming up with the premise of the story. But I think that the fact that he was willing to be so dedicated to the source material is also a very good thing. And so I think that's kind of where my good things stop and my criticisms begin, because I think there are a lot of criticisms, and I don't want you to think that these criticisms make the film bad. They were certainly things that I felt took away from my experience, or maybe drew me out of the story a little bit, or confused me, or made me furrow my brow, or kind of laugh in a way, and not in a good way, like laugh in like a really kind of way. And so the first thing I guess I'll talk about is the dialogue. Okay, so I think that from what I understand, Markiplier also wrote the script for this, probably in conjunction with the team of writers. But there are, and again, this could be kind of like a Markiplier acting problem where the line delivery is not great. But from there were a few lines in the movie that were like one-liners that I think were like supposed to be funny or witty, and they just did not hit that way. I think like there was one, I'm not going to say it, but there was one line said by kind of the voice over the radio, the person that's like outside of the ship trying to guide Markiplier around, that says something, and I literally I wanted to burst out laughing because it was so dumb. And again, maybe it was a line delivery problem, but it was just so corny, and I was like, ugh, like it gave me that secondhand embarrassment, and I felt that happen multiple times throughout the film. And I'm not gonna mention exactly where it was because I want you to go out and experience this for yourself, and I don't want to kind of ruin that. If you are gonna watch this with a critical eye, I'm curious to know kind of if you had that same impression of a few of the kind of one-liners that were in the movie. I guess I'll also talk about the acting. Okay, so I already mentioned that it's impressive, kind of how Markiplier is really, this is his first acting role, and I think he did a really great job. That being said, I think that there were some things where I was like, this is a bit too much. This is a bit over the top. There were not character motivations or decisions that were made that took me out of it, but more just the emotions of primarily anger and frustration I felt were not working for me. And I don't know what it was. It might have been just Markiplier being casted in this role and him being kind of a new actor, where I didn't feel like he pulled off a lot of the emotional, angry, sad scenes as well as I felt would have been pulled off. I don't know, but maybe I have a really high bar. I'm not totally certain. But for me, I just I was looking at it and I was like, yeah, it's not really doing it for me. And that's fine. Ultimately, again, I'm still very impressed with how he did overall. I thought that he did a great job, but there were just moments where emotions were high and I was I feel like he's not landing this emotion. I feel like he's fabricating this emotion. It feels fake to me. That was just my opinion of things. Next, I guess I'll just talk about the story. My criticisms of the story are basically this. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and very careful planning to take an entire universe of lore and package it down into 2 hours and create a sustainable narrative that wraps together in the end in a satisfying way. And so I understand how hard that can be. But I don't think that it ultimately succeeded in the end. And I don't blame Markiplier, and I don't blame the team for not being able to wrap it all together necessarily, because I think that coming into this not knowing anything like from Iron Lung or from anything like this, there's so much going on in terms of like, well, why are they on this moon? What's going on with this blood ocean? Why are they at the bottom of the ocean? What are they looking for? And then it was never clearly conveyed to me why or what they were looking for at the bottom of the ocean. And then there were periods throughout the movie that like logically did not make too much sense. Like there was a point in time where that Markiplier found something that was super, super important, that was vital to like the mission that they were trying to accomplish. And the person was like, I'm only gonna give you 30 minutes to do this. And if you don't do it, then I'm pulling out. But I was like, wait, but this is super important to you. Why would you only give Markiplier 30 minutes to do this when this is something that you want? Wouldn't you do anything you possibly can to help him and wait to get him out and to pull him out? Anyways, there was some sort of inconsistencies in that capacity regarding character motivations that I felt did not make too much sense. There was also some things where it was like they wanted to get a sample of something down in the ocean to like study it, but then in the end, that same person admits that there was that sample wasn't gonna be important anyways, and there was no point to doing it. And so that was like, I was like, well, what the fuck was the point of that entire scene then? Like, it didn't really seem to make much sense to me. That didn't really add up a lot. I just felt like there were a lot of moving pieces that were not clicking for me. And what I'll say is this, is that I think also some of it was the sound mixing. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the video, but the mixing of sound, I watched Moist Critical's opinion on Iron Lung, and he talked about this a little bit, where he was like, there were periods in the film where I was trying to listen to the narrative and hear what was going on, but I literally couldn't because there was so much noise, and like the volumes weren't super great in terms of, making sure you could hear one voice over the other. And I saw him say that, and I was like, well, he's probably just hard of hearing or something like that. But then what I'll say is that like 30 to 40% of the film, I was like, I have no idea what's going on because I can't hear anybody. I can't hear what Markiplier's saying. I can't hear what somebody's saying over the radio. I can't hear this voice. I have no idea what's going on or why anything's happening. And that was a problem because a lot of the context for the story is done through these kind of narrative excerpts from these voices. There were times where I was like, I don't know what we're doing or who's saying what. I don't know anything at all what's going on. And I did not like that. And again, maybe that was a me thing. Maybe I'm just so used to closed captioning now and like subtitles where I need those. But I think that subtitles are like super necessary for this film, because otherwise I was just like, okay, radio voice. Okay, Markiplier said something that I don't understand. But then they would make a decision that I felt was guided and directed by kind of a conversation that was had that I did not totally hear because, again, it was so difficult for me to understand. So I felt like the sound mixing could use some work a little bit, or maybe it was just me, but who knows? Let me know how you felt about that. Lastly, what I'll say is the narrative overall, okay? Again, I can't really like credit or discredit Markiplier for the overall premise. I think it's a really good premise, right? I have to credit the creator of the source material, but what I will say is that the way in which Markiplier, or the way in which this movie, I think, attempted to execute the premise and the narrative was the world building and the curiosity that was, and the tension, was all of that was building up over the 2-hour span of time. Was it all wrapped up in a good bow, and was it all explained and put together in a way that made me satisfied when I left the movie? And unfortunately, I don't feel like it was. Now, I know that's confusing because ultimately I said that this was a good movie. I felt like I got my time's worth out of it. And so maybe you might hear that and say like, well, why is this a good movie if you feel like dissatisfied with the way in which things ended and the way in which all of this was wrapped up? I know, I get it. I still feel like the tension and the moment-to-moment beats of the story were well enough executed that it held my attention and curiosity all the way till the end. However, overall, I don't feel as if the payoff was tight enough, was good enough for me to confidently leave the movie having been like, oh yeah, that's that's a crazy premise, or that was a crazy ending, right? In fact, I went with my friend and I looked at him and I said, so what the hell just happened? And that was kind of how we both felt. It was just like we had to like have a moment to moment, or we had to have like an hour to 2 hour long debrief about kind of what occurred and tried to piece together the history and the lore behind of everything that was going on and whether or not the ending did service to all of that. And I think I personally kind of arrived at the position that I don't think it did it well enough. I think it did a lot of the earlier parts of the film a pretty big disservice, because a lot of the earlier parts of the film are super strong in building this tension and building this narrative. In fact, in such a way where like the payoff was, it had to be so big that I just don't think that it ultimately landed. And so that was kind of disappointing, I will say. Another criticism, I guess, is just that the pacing of the movie, right, from beginning to middle to end, if you were to divide it, I would say that the middle portions of the movie are probably the weakest. Now, this is just a general thing, and when it comes to storytelling, screenwriting, the middle arc, the second arc of a story, or excuse me, the second act of a story is always the hardest to craft. It's always the hardest because a lot of it is, it's not the introduction to something, so it's not super exciting, and it's not the ending where the big climax is happening. A lot of it is like this contextual ball of mush that is supposed to build the world, but also be exciting at times and have these moments of reflection. It's a weird thing. Like this is a very well understood thing when it comes to screenwriting and story writing, is that the second act tends to be the hardest one to do, because you're trying to understand, well, how am I supposed to continue to build tension towards a climax while simultaneously building the world and finding scenes that fit kind of the overall direction that I want this to go in. Let me get my cat off my thing. Get off! Sorry, I'm painting a painting and I don't want to mess things up. All that to say is, I felt that was also pretty weak. So at the end of the day, those are sort of my first impressions of the movie. I felt that it was good. I felt that I was good. I would not go see it again unless maybe I played the game. And I think what I'm going to do is, I watched the movie. I'm going to sit on that for a minute. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to play the game. I want to know more about this universe, because ultimately it is a very cool premise. It's a very interesting world. I think I understand why Markiplier felt so passionate about making this film and bringing this story to life, because it has a lot of really cool potential. And I love, you can feel how passionate he is as a creator and how passionate he is when it comes to creating this movie. And I think that the fact that he was able to do something that was so well crafted and produced, and the effects and just the overall atmosphere of the film on the budget that he did, being an independent creator, is a first-time filmmaker, okay, coming from YouTube, right, and battling with like some of cinema's like top competitors, being top of the charts where he is right now, is an insane accomplishment, despite the criticisms that you have. Like, criticisms regardless does not take away or detract from the fact that this is an incredible achievement. I think that has to be said. This is an incredible achievement, and I'm so happy that Markiplier was able to do this for himself. Again, I don't know a lot about him, but I'm super interested in learning more. I'm super interested in playing the game and learning more about the lore. So I'm gonna do that, and then I think I'm gonna kind of come back and maybe revisit a lot of the thoughts that I had and maybe talk about it in a separate video. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What did you like? What did you not like? And if you're interested in learning more about what I do here on this channel, then feel free to subscribe. My name is Sir Moonlad, and I'm signing off. Peace.